I'm Eleanor, 68, a retired teacher from Minnesota with 3 adult children who I thought I knew. Catherine is 42, Richard is 39, and Rebecca is 36. When we planned a family trip to Hawaii for my grandchild's graduation, I never imagined being abandoned at the airport gate, watching their backs as they boarded without me. There weren't enough seats together, they said. That moment changed everything, about how I saw them, myself, and my future. Before I tell you how I turned this heartbreak into the most liberating decision of my life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button to join me for more stories of finding strength when you least expect it. My life as a mother began like many others, filled with hopes and dreams for a perfect family. My husband Thomas and I had 3 beautiful children. Catherine, our ambitious firstborn, Richard, our serious middle child, and Rebecca, our free-spirited baby. We were happy, truly happy, until Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack. Catherine was 12, Richard was 9, and Rebecca had just turned 6. I remember the funeral like it was yesterday. 3 small figures in black clothes, not fully understanding that Daddy wasn't coming home. That night, as I tucked them into bed with tears still wet on my cheeks, I made a silent promise to Thomas that I would give our children everything they needed to thrive, no matter what it cost me. And it cost me plenty. I kept our modest house by working 2 jobs, teaching elementary school during the day and waitressing 3 nights a week. My sister Nancy watched the kids on those evenings, the only help I would accept. I was too proud to take charity but too practical to turn down childcare from family. There were so many sacrifices that became second nature. I wore the same winter coat for 15 years, patching it rather than buying new. I cut everyone's hair at our kitchen table. Vacations were camping trips to state parks, not the Disneyland adventures their friends enjoyed. When the refrigerator was running low before payday, I'd claim I wasn't hungry or had eaten earlier. The children never went without meals, but there were many nights I survived on toast and tea after they went to bed. College was the mountain I feared most. 3 tuitions loomed in our future like an impossible summit, but I started saving when they were small. $20 here, $50 there when I could manage it. I refinanced the house twice to pull out equity for their education. I took summer school teaching positions and weekend inventory jobs at local stores. My hands were never idle. My mind never free from financial calculations. Catherine attended State University and graduated with a marketing degree. She now works as an executive at a national firm and married James, a financial advisor whose family money meant Catherine never had to struggle again. Their wedding cost more than I made in a year, most of it paid by his parents. They live in a sprawling house in the suburbs with a pool and home theater. No children, they're focused on their careers. Richard was my studious one. He earned a scholarship that covered half his medical school tuition, and I managed the rest through loans and my teaching salary. He's now a successful orthopedic surgeon married to Stephanie, a pediatrician he met during residency. They have 2 teenagers who attend private school in summer at specialized camps for gifted students. They live in an exclusive neighborhood and belong to the country club. Rebecca, my baby, always had a knack for computers. She studied information technology and now manages a team at a growing tech company. She married Daniel, an architect, and they have 3 children including my eldest grandchild, Lily, who was graduating high school with honors. The reason for our Hawaii trip. They live in a modern home filled with art and the latest gadgets. All 3 of my children are successful by any measure. I should be proud, and I am. But somewhere along their journey to success, something shifted between us. I became an afterthought, someone to call on Mother's Day and Christmas, someone whose opinions were outdated, whose company was more obligation than pleasure. Catherine stopped asking my advice years ago. When I offered suggestions about anything, recipes, gardening, even child-rearing, she would smile tightly and say, "That's not really how things are done anymore, Mom." She scheduled lunches with me once a month, checking her watch throughout and rarely staying longer than an hour. Richard grew more distant with each promotion. He'd call to share his accomplishments but rarely asked about my life. When I visited, he'd show me around their beautiful home like a tour guide, not a son welcoming his mother. At family gatherings, he'd talk over me or redirect conversations when I spoke about my teaching career. Rebecca at least tried to include me in her family's life, inviting me to school events and recitals. But even she grew impatient with my slower pace, my struggle with technology, my old-fashioned values. I caught her rolling her eyes at her siblings when I couldn't figure out how to use the food delivery app on my phone. There were 1,000 small cuts before the airport incident. The time Catherine forgot to invite me to her holiday party. The way Richard corrected my grammar in front of his colleagues. Rebecca asking if I could watch her children, then criticizing how I'd cared for them. I absorbed these wounds quietly, making excuses for their behavior. They were busy. They were stressed. They didn't mean it. But there were signs I refused to see, warnings I ignored. Like the previous Thanksgiving when they discussed their Hawaiian vacation plans right in front of me, without including me, until I asked directly if I was invited. The awkward pause before Catherine said, "Of course, Mom. We just weren't sure you'd want to come." I should have known then. But a mother sees what she wants to see, believes what she needs to believe. I chose to focus on the good. My beautiful grandchildren, the successful adults my children had become. The promise of a family vacation where we might reconnect. I was wrong. When Rebecca called to tell me about Lily's graduation, I could hear the pride in her voice. "Mom, she's graduating with a 4.0 and got accepted to Cornell. We're planning something special to celebrate." I congratulated her and offered to host a party at my house. There was a pause before Rebecca said, "Actually, we're thinking bigger. We're planning a family trip to Hawaii." My heart soared. A family vacation. It had been years since we'd all traveled together. The last time was a weekend at a lake cabin when Richard was still in medical school. I immediately began offering ideas. I could research hotels, I suggested. I've been saving travel magazines with articles about Maui and Kauai. "That's okay, Mom," Rebecca said quickly. "Catherine's already looking into resorts. She has points we can use." Over the next few weeks, I tried to participate in the planning. I emailed links to activities and restaurants. I suggested dates that might offer better airfares. Each time, my input was politely acknowledged then ignored. The children held planning sessions without me, making decisions I only learned about afterward. They chose Maui, staying at an exclusive resort that featured prominently in luxury travel magazines. They set the dates for a 10-day stay around Lily's graduation in June. Then came the discussion about costs. I assumed my children, all financially successful, would cover the bulk of expenses. I was living comfortably on my teacher's pension, but didn't have abundant discretionary income for luxury travel. Richard called one evening in April. "Mom, we've worked out the finances for Hawaii," he said in his efficient doctor's voice. "Your portion comes to $4,200. I nearly dropped the phone. That was almost 3 months of my pension. "That seems high," I managed to say. "It's actually quite reasonable," Richard countered. "We're staying at a premium resort. Your share covers your flight, your portion of the accommodations, and the shared activities we've planned." I wanted to ask why they'd chosen such an expensive option without consulting me about my budget. I wanted to point out that their combined household incomes were more than 15 times my pension. Instead, I said I would need to check my savings. That night, I transferred money from my emergency fund to my checking account. I had been saving that money for a new water heater, but family came first. It always had. Despite the financial strain, I was genuinely excited about the trip. I hadn't been to Hawaii since my honeymoon with Thomas 45 years earlier. I bought new sandals and a modest swimsuit. I got a haircut and splurged on a floral sundress for Lily's graduation. I practiced using my smartphone camera so I could capture memories. I imagined leisurely breakfasts with my grandchildren, long walks on the beach with my daughters, perhaps even heart-to-heart conversations that might bridge the growing distance between us. I pictured myself in a circle of family, belonging, cherished. The night before departure, I was putting final items in my suitcase when Richard called. "Mom, about tomorrow," he began. "We're going to be really rushed getting the kids organized. It probably makes more sense if you just meet us at the airport." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "I thought we were all riding together in the van you rented." "Change of plans," he said breezily. "Just grab a taxi to Terminal 2. We'll meet you at the gate." I agreed, ignoring the twinge of hurt. They were busy with children, I reasoned. It was practical. But as I hung up, I remembered how I had always managed to transport 3 children and luggage by myself when they were young, often on public buses because we couldn't afford a car. I pushed the thought away. This wasn't about the past, it was about our future as a family. That night I could hardly sleep. I was excited about Hawaii, about seeing Lily graduate, about 10 days with the people I loved most in the world. I set 3 alarms to ensure I wouldn't oversleep and laid out my traveling clothes. Comfortable pants and a light sweater for the air-conditioned plane. I double-checked my documents and packed a small gift for Lily, a delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. I was ready for our family adventure. I had no idea what was really waiting for me at the airport. My taxi pulled up to Terminal 2 at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport 3 hours before our scheduled departure. I've always been punctual, a habit from decades of teaching. Being late to a classroom of 30 elementary schoolers was asking for chaos. I paid the driver, gathered my carefully packed suitcase and carry-on bag, and headed inside. The terminal was bustling with summer travelers, families with excited children, business people striding purposefully, college students with backpacks. I felt a flutter of anticipation as I joined the crowd. I texted Catherine, "I'm at Terminal 2. Where should I meet you all?" While waiting for a response, I checked in at the airline counter and received my boarding pass. The airline attendant smiled as she handed it to me. "Boarding will begin in about 2 hours. You have plenty of time." I thanked her and checked my phone again. Catherine had responded, "We're grabbing breakfast. Meet at gate H8. I found a coffee shop, bought a small tea, and settled in with my novel. I didn't want to interrupt their breakfast, though I wished they had invited me to join them. After finishing my tea, I made my way through security and toward gate H8. As I approached the gate area, I spotted them immediately. Catherine was typing on her laptop while James scrolled through his phone beside her. Richard and Stephanie were organizing their children's backpacks. Rebecca and Daniel were sitting with their 3 children, including Lily, my graduating grandchild. They had coffee cups and pastry wrappers scattered around them. "There you all are," I called out, wheeling my suitcase toward them. Catherine glanced up. "Oh, you made it," she said, then returned to her laptop. No one stood to greet me. No one offered to take my bag or make space for me to sit. I stood awkwardly at the edge of their group until Rebecca finally moved her purse from a chair. "How was your morning, Mom?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "Fine, thank you. The taxi driver was very nice." I settled into the chair, placing my carry-on bag at my feet. "I'm so excited about this trip. Isn't it wonderful that we can all be together for Lily's celebration?" My granddaughter looked up and smiled. "Thanks, Grandma. I'm glad you could come. At least someone seemed genuinely pleased to see me." I reached for my water bottle, noticing that the boarding time was approaching. "Do you have all the boarding passes?" I asked, looking around at my children. They exchanged glances, a silent communication I couldn't decipher. Richard cleared his throat. "About that, Mom," he began, his doctor voice slipping into place. "There's been a slight change of plans with the seating arrangements." I waited for him to continue, but he seemed to be choosing his words carefully. The gate agent announced that boarding would begin in 15 minutes, starting with first-class passengers and those needing special assistance. "What change?" I prompted when Richard remained silent. Catherine snapped her laptop closed. "The flight is very full," she said briskly. "We couldn't get all 9 seats together."
10, he corrected gently.
"There are 10 of us." Another exchange of glances. Rebecca sighed. "Mom, the thing is, there aren't enough seats together for everyone. We managed to get 2 rows of 3 and a row of 2 adjacent to each other." And I still wasn't understanding the issue. "And," Richard continued, "we thought it made the most sense for the families to stay together. The children need supervision, and couples shouldn't be separated." I looked at each of their faces, the truth slowly dawning on me. "So where am I sitting?" Catherine stood, gathering her belongings. "We've arranged for you to be on the next flight. It's only 2 hours later. The airline has your information." The gate agent announced boarding for first-class passengers. "You're putting me on a different flight?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It makes the most sense," Richard insisted. This way the families stay together. I'm family, I said, my voice small. Rebecca at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Of course you are, Mom. It's just for the flight. We'll see you in Maui this afternoon. The gate agent called for priority boarding groups. My children stood, collecting their carry-on bags and children. Wait, I said, rising from my chair. You've actually removed me from this flight? It's just a standby ticket, Catherine explained impatiently. You might still get on if there are no shows. But my luggage is checked through to Maui, Richard finished. It'll be waiting for you. The gate agent called their boarding group. As a unit, my children and their families moved toward the boarding line. Not one of them looked back at me. I stood frozen, watching them present their boarding passes and disappear down the jetway. Lily glanced back once, confusion on her young face, before her mother ushered her forward. In a daze, I approached the gate agent, a woman about Catherine's age with a name tag that read Susan. Excuse me, I said, my voice trembling slightly. My family seems to have changed my reservation. I was supposed to be on this flight to Maui. Susan typed my name into her computer. Mrs. Williams? Yes, I see what happened. Your original reservation was changed to standby status for this flight, with a confirmed seat on the 2:45 p.m. departure. Changed by whom? She glanced at her screen. The change was made by Catherine Williams 3 days ago. 3 days ago. While I was shopping for a sundress and packing my suitcase, my daughter was removing me from our family flight. While I was imagining breakfasts together and beach walks, they were planning to send me alone on a later plane. Is there any chance I can still board this flight? I asked. Susan gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry, we're completely full. Not even a middle seat in the back. She lowered her voice. Did your family not discuss this change with you? I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I was 68 years old, standing in a public airport, abandoned by my own children. The humiliation was almost as painful as the betrayal. No, I said simply. They didn't. As the final boarding calls were announced, I watched through the large windows as the plane pushed back from the gate. My family was on that plane, flying to a luxury resort in Hawaii, while I stood alone with my carry-on bag and a standby ticket that might not even get me there today. In that moment, something broke inside me, but something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. I found a quiet corner of the gate area and sat down, my hands shaking. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to cry in public. Not sobbing, just silent tears that slipped down my cheeks as travelers rushed past, no one noticing the elderly woman whose heart was breaking. Mrs. Williams? A gentle voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Susan, the gate agent. Her shift had ended, and she stood before me with concern in her eyes. Are you all right? I wiped my cheeks quickly. I'm fine, thank you. Just a little surprised by my change in plans. Susan sat in the chair beside me. I hope you don't mind my saying this, but what your family did wasn't right. Changing your ticket without telling you. Leaving you behind like that. They said there weren't enough seats together, I explained weakly, still making excuses for them. Susan shook her head. I checked the reservation history. They originally had 10 seats booked together. A full row of 6 and 4 seats directly behind. 3 days ago, they changed the configuration and moved you to standby. My chest tightened as the full truth hit me. They hadn't just taken advantage of a seating problem, they had created one. They had deliberately removed me from the flight. Why would they do that? I whispered, more to myself than to Susan. I don't know, she said gently. But I do know you have options. She handed me a card. This is the customer service desk in Concourse C. If you go there now, you can get your standby ticket changed to a confirmed seat. I took the card, thanking her. As she turned to leave, she hesitated. You know, we do have a few first-class seats available on your flight. They're expensive, but... She trailed off, seeming embarrassed to mention money. First class. I had never flown first class in my life. Even on our honeymoon, Thomas and I had saved money by taking the cheapest seats. First class was for people like my children, people with expense accounts and premium credit cards. But a strange feeling was growing inside me. A feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Indignation. Righteous anger. And beneath that, a question that had been buried for years. What about what I want? I had spent my entire adult life putting my children first. I had gone without so they could have. I had worked extra jobs so they could attend college without debt. I had sacrificed my own dreams of travel and education to ensure they had every opportunity. And how had they repaid that lifetime of sacrifice? By abandoning me at an airport gate, removing me from a family vacation I had paid for with money I could barely afford, treating me like an inconvenience rather than their mother. Actually, I said, standing up with sudden determination, I would like to inquire about that first-class seat. 20 minutes later, I stood at the customer service desk, my new boarding pass in hand. The cost of upgrading to first class had been significant, almost as much as I had already contributed to the vacation fund. I had put it on my credit card without allowing myself to reconsider. For once, I wasn't going to worry about being practical or frugal. With 4 hours until my flight, I did something else unprecedented. I went shopping in the airport boutiques. I bought a soft cashmere travel blanket in pale blue. I selected a pair of sunglasses that the young saleswoman assured me were very chic. I purchased a paperback novel by an author my book club had recommended. At a cosmetics counter, I allowed a saleswoman to apply a new lipstick, Coral Sunrise, she called it, and purchased it along with facial mist for the dry airplane air. In a moment of further extravagance, I bought a small bottle of perfume with notes of gardenia that reminded me of my mother's garden. When it was finally time to board my flight, I felt like a different person than the abandoned mother who had stood watching her family leave hours earlier. I wasn't just angry, I was resolved. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The first-class experience was everything I had never allowed myself to imagine. A flight attendant named Michael took my coat and asked if I would like champagne before takeoff. The seat was wide and comfortable, with controls to adjust it into various positions including completely flat for sleeping. A menu offered several meal options for lunch, all of which sounded delicious. As the plane took off, I sipped my champagne, I had said yes, and looked out the window at Minnesota falling away below me. For the first time in my adult life, I was flying towards something just for me. Not for my children, not because of obligation, but because I deserved this moment of comfort and luxury. The meal service began shortly after we reached cruising altitude. I selected seared salmon with asparagus and a glass of white wine. While I ate from real dishes with metal cutlery, I opened my new novel but found myself unable to focus on the words. Instead, my mind kept returning to the events of the day, examining them from new angles. Had there been signs earlier that my children viewed me as a burden? Yes, countless small moments when they made me feel irrelevant or embarrassing. Had I enabled their behavior by always putting their needs first? Undoubtedly. Was I angry? Absolutely. But beyond the anger was something unexpected. Relief. Relief at finally seeing clearly. Relief at being removed from the pretense that my children respected me when their actions showed otherwise. Relief at having these hours alone to think without managing other people's feelings. After lunch, I reclined my seat and closed my eyes. Instead of focusing on my hurt and betrayal, I allowed myself to imagine possibilities. What if this trip became something different than what I had planned? What if, instead of trying to win my children's approval and inclusion, I simply lived for myself? The thought was so foreign it was almost frightening. I had defined myself as a mother for so long, measuring my worth by my children's happiness and success. Who was I if not the sacrificing mother, the supportive parent, the doting grandmother? I was Eleanor Williams, and for perhaps the first time since Thomas died, I allowed myself to wonder what Eleanor Williams might want for herself. When we landed in Maui, I was relaxed, rested, and resolute. I had made decisions during that flight that would change everything, though my children didn't know it yet. They had abandoned me at an airport to save themselves minor inconvenience. I would never again allow myself to be treated as an afterthought in my own family. As I collected my luggage and stepped into the warm Hawaiian air, I smiled. I was no longer joining my family's vacation. They were about to become unwitting participants in my transformation. The resort was exactly as pictured in the glossy brochure Rebecca had sent me weeks earlier. A sprawling complex of elegant buildings nestled between lush tropical gardens and a pristine beach. Palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, and the air smelled of plumeria and salt water. I approached the reception desk, where a young woman with a flower in her hair greeted me with a warm, "Aloha." "I'm checking in," I said. "Eleanor Williams." She typed on her computer. "Yes, Mrs. Williams. I see you're part of the Williams-Bennett-Harris family group. Those were my children's married names. Your room is connected to your daughter Catherine's suite." "Actually," I said, surprising myself with my steadiness, "I'd prefer a separate room, not connected to my family's accommodations." The receptionist looked confused. "But the reservation specifies." "I understand, but I'm requesting a change. Something quiet, with an ocean view if possible." More typing. "We do have a garden bungalow available. It's one of our premium accommodations, very private, with its own small plunge pool and a partial ocean view from the terrace." "That sounds perfect," I said, presenting my credit card without asking the price. As she processed my new room, I texted Rebecca. "Arrived safely in Maui. Checking in now." The response came quickly. "Great. We're at the North Pool. Room keys are waiting for you at reception. We're in Hibiscus Building, 3rd floor." I didn't respond. The garden bungalow was charming and secluded, separated from the main buildings by a winding path through tropical foliage. Inside, a king-sized bed faced glass doors that opened onto a private terrace. The bathroom featured a deep soaking tub and separate rainfall shower. It was more luxurious than anywhere I had stayed in my life. I unpacked methodically, hanging my clothes in the spacious closet. I changed into my new sundress, applied the coral lipstick, and spritzed a bit of the gardenia perfume. Then I called the concierge to make a dinner reservation for one at the resort's oceanfront restaurant for later that evening. Only then did I text Rebecca again. "Settled in my own accommodation. We'll meet you all for breakfast tomorrow. Enjoy your evening." I turned my phone to silent and slipped it into my purse. Then I went for a walk along the beach, savoring the feeling of warm sand between my toes and the spectacular sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I felt lighter somehow, unburdened. My phone had accumulated several messages by the time I checked it again. Rebecca wanted to know what I meant by my own accommodation. Catherine demanded to know why I wasn't in the adjoining room they had arranged. Richard asked if I was creating problems already. I responded to the group text. "I've checked into a garden bungalow. Very comfortable. Looking forward to seeing everyone at breakfast, 8:30 at the Terrace restaurant." Then I turned off my phone completely and enjoyed a magnificent dinner of fresh fish and tropical fruits while watching the moonlight dance across the waves. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant precisely at 8:30. My family was already seated at a large table. Catherine and James, Richard and Stephanie with their teenagers, Rebecca and Daniel with their 3 children including Lily. They fell silent as I approached. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, taking the empty chair between Lily and Richard's son. Catherine didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mom, what's going on? Why didn't you take the room we arranged?" "I preferred my own space," I said simply, turning to smile at my grandchildren. "How are you all enjoying Hawaii so far?" "Mom," Richard interjected, "the adjoining room arrangement was part of the package deal. You're costing us extra by changing accommodations." I buttered a piece of toast calmly. "Not at all. I'm paying for my bungalow separately." "That's not the point," Catherine said, lowering her voice as a waiter approached. "The point is we had a plan, and you're disrupting it." I looked at her directly. "Yes, it's unpleasant when travel plans are changed without proper consultation, isn't it?" The adults at the table exchanged glances, suddenly very interested in their breakfast plates. Lily looked between us, sensing the tension. "Did something happen, Grandma?" she asked innocently. "Nothing important, dear," I assured her. "Now tell me about your graduation preparations. I understand the ceremony is tomorrow afternoon." Throughout breakfast, my children attempted to corner me with questions about my separate room, my late arrival in Maui, my attitude. I deflected each inquiry with pleasant conversation about the resort amenities or questions directed to my grandchildren. By the end of the meal, Catherine was seething, Richard was frustrated, and Rebecca looked worried. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, I announced my plans for the day. "I've booked a spa treatment this morning, and then I thought I might explore the walking trails. I'll see you all at dinner. Mom, we have a snorkeling excursion planned, Rebecca protested. The reservation includes you. How thoughtful, I said. But I don't care for snorkeling. Please enjoy yourselves. I spent the day exactly as I planned, being pampered with a massage and facial at the luxurious spa, then walking the scenic coastal trail at my own pace, stopping to photograph tropical flowers and ocean vistas. I had a light lunch at a small cafe I discovered, chatting with the friendly server about local attractions. For the first time in years, possibly decades, I followed only my own preferences without considering anyone else's needs or judgments. The following day was Lily's graduation ceremony. I wore my new sundress and arrived early at the school, selecting a seat toward the middle of the auditorium rather than saving spaces in front for the family as I would have done previously. When my children arrived with their spouses, they looked around in confusion until Rebecca spotted me. Mom, we're sitting up front, she called, gesturing to the reserved section. I'm comfortable here, I replied with a smile. See you after the ceremony. I watched with immense pride as Lily accepted her diploma. She had her mother's intelligence and her grandfather's kind eyes. When the ceremony concluded, I made my way through the crowd to find her. Congratulations, Lily, I said, embracing her warmly. I am so proud of you. I presented her with the small wrapped box containing my mother's pearl necklace. She opened it, her eyes widening. Grandma, it's beautiful. It belonged to your great-grandmother, I explained. I wore it on my graduation day, and now it's yours. Lily hugged me tightly. Thank you. This means so much. Rebecca appeared at her daughter's side. What's this? Lily showed her the necklace, explaining its history. Rebecca looked surprised. Mom, you never mentioned you were giving her something so valuable. There are many things I haven't mentioned, I replied mildly. That evening, the resort had arranged a special dinner to celebrate Lily's graduation. We were seated at a private table on a terrace overlooking the ocean. The setting was magical. Tiki torches illuminated the space, and stars twinkled above the gentle waves. Midway through the main course, Catherine raised her glass. A toast to Lily, who makes us all proud, and to this family vacation that James and I have arranged to celebrate her achievement. I took a sip of my water without commenting on her taking credit for what had been a group effort, financially and otherwise. But when Richard followed with a self-congratulatory speech about the value of education and hard work, emphasizing the opportunities we've provided for the younger generation, something snapped inside me. I'd like to say something, I said, my voice clear and carrying across the table. All eyes turned to me, some wary, others curious. Lily, your accomplishment is truly remarkable, and no one deserves celebration more than you. I smiled at my granddaughter before continuing. But since we're discussing family values and the opportunities we provide for one another, I think this is an appropriate moment to address what happened at the Minneapolis airport. The adults at the table tensed visibly. Richard began to interrupt, but I held up my hand. No, Richard, I'm speaking now. The firmness in my voice surprised even me. 2 days ago, all of you boarded a plane without me after deliberately changing my ticket to standby status without informing me. You left me standing alone at the gate, watching my family abandon me because I was inconvenient. Rebecca at least had the grace to look ashamed. Mom, we tried calling you. No, you didn't, I stated flatly. Not one of you called or texted until I was already standing at the gate watching you board. Catherine shifted uncomfortably. There weren't enough seats together. There were originally 10 seats reserved together, I interrupted. I spoke with the gate agent. 3 days before our departure, Catherine changed the configuration and removed me from the flight. Silence fell over the table. The grandchildren looked confused, the spouses uncomfortable. Why? I asked simply. Why would you treat your mother, who raised you alone after your father died, who worked 2 jobs to put food on the table, who put all 3 of you through college, like excess baggage to be left behind? Richard cleared his throat. Mom, you're being dramatic. It was just a flight arrangement. It was a symptom of how you've all come to view me, I corrected him. As an afterthought, an obligation, someone whose feelings and dignity don't matter. That's not fair, Catherine protested, but her voice lacked conviction. A server approached to clear plates, sensed the tension, and quietly retreated. What's not fair, I continued once we were alone again, is treating the woman who gave you life and devoted her entire existence to your well-being as if she were nothing. What's not fair is taking my financial contribution to this trip while excluding me from the flight. What's not fair is expecting me to accept disrespect and dismissal with a grateful smile. The table fell silent again. Lily reached over and squeezed my hand, a simple gesture of support that nearly brought tears to my eyes. Daniel, Rebecca's husband, was the first to speak. Eleanor is right, he said quietly. What happened at the airport was wrong. I should have said something then, and I apologize for not doing so. Rebecca shot him an angry look, but he continued. No, Rebecca. Think about how you would feel if Lily treated you that way 20 years from now. His words seemed to penetrate. Rebecca's expression softened, and she looked at me with new eyes. I'm sorry. We should have handled it differently. Catherine and Richard remained defensive, making excuses about logistics and family units, but their arguments sounded hollow even to their own ears. The truth, exposed under the Hawaiian stars, was undeniable. They had treated me shamefully, and everyone at the table knew it. I stood, placing my napkin beside my plate. I'm not looking for apologies or explanations tonight. I simply wanted the truth acknowledged. Lily deserves to celebrate her graduation without further family drama. If you'll excuse me, I'll return to my bungalow now. As I walked away from the table, I heard Lily say, "That was really messed up, what you did to Grandma." The unfiltered honesty of an 18-year-old, cutting through pretense. I smiled to myself as I followed the torchlit path back to my private sanctuary. The confrontation had been necessary, not to shame my children, but to reclaim my own dignity. For the first time since their betrayal at the airport, I felt completely at peace. The morning after the graduation dinner, I woke early and sat on my private terrace, watching the sunrise paint the sky in delicate pinks and golds. A small bird with brilliant red feathers hopped along the railing, tilting its head curiously at me before flying away. In that quiet moment, with the scent of tropical flowers filling the air, I made the decision that would permanently alter my relationship with my children and the trajectory of my remaining years. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in several years. Martin, Peterson and Associates. A receptionist answered. This is Eleanor Williams. I'd like to speak with Howard Martin, please. Howard had been Thomas's college roommate and had handled our legal affairs for decades. He had prepared our wills, helped with the house purchase, and advised me on financial matters after Thomas died. Eleanor. Howard's familiar voice boomed through the phone. What a pleasant surprise. How are you? I'm actually in Hawaii, I told him. With my family. But I need your advice on some changes I want to make to my will and estate planning. Howard's tone turned professional. I see. What sort of changes are you considering? Substantial ones, I replied. Is there any way we could arrange a video call in the next day or two? I'd like to get this process started immediately. Howard agreed to a video conference the following morning. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and searched for local attorneys in Maui who specialized in estate planning. I found a well-reviewed firm and called to request a same-day consultation. To my surprise, they had an opening that afternoon. I confirmed the appointment, then spent an hour researching details about education trusts and charitable foundations. By the time I left my bungalow, dressed in my most businesslike vacation attire, I had a clear vision of what I wanted to accomplish. The law office of Kahale and Wong was located in a professional building, just a 10-minute taxi ride from the resort. Attorney Leilani Wong, a woman about Catherine's age with a warm smile and sharp eyes, welcomed me into her office. Mrs. Williams, how can I help you today? It's not often we have visitors who want to discuss estate planning during their Hawaiian vacation. I explained my situation briefly. My status as a widow, my 3 adult children, my grandchildren, and my desire to make significant changes to how my assets would be distributed after my death. I understand you already have legal representation back in Minnesota, Ms. Wong noted. I'm happy to consult with you, but any official documents would need to be executed in your state of residence. I understand, I assured her. I'm meeting with my attorney tomorrow. I wanted to discuss options first, and get a second opinion on some ideas I'm considering. For the next hour, we talked through various approaches to restructuring my estate plan. Ms. Wong was thorough and insightful, asking thoughtful questions about my goals and concerns. She explained the implications of different choices without pushing me in any particular direction. By the end of our consultation, I had a clear roadmap for the changes I wanted to make. I thanked Ms. Wong, paid her consultation fee, and returned to the resort with a newfound sense of purpose. That evening, I declined the family dinner, ordering room service instead and preparing notes for my video call with Howard the next morning. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my children, alternating between concerns about my absence and thinly veiled accusations of causing drama. I responded only once, assuring them I was fine but busy with personal matters. The video call with Howard the following morning lasted nearly 2 hours. He was initially surprised by the extent of the changes I proposed, but after hearing my explanation, including a forthright account of the airport incident and years of dismissive treatment, he understood my reasoning. "These are significant changes, Eleanor," he cautioned. "Are you certain this is what you want?" "More certain than I've been about anything in years," I replied. Howard agreed to draft the new documents, which would require my signature upon returning to Minnesota. In the meantime, he prepared a preliminary document that I could sign electronically, indicating my intention to make these changes and invalidating my previous will until the new one was executed. With the legal groundwork laid, I turned my attention to another long-deferred dream: travel. While my children assumed I was resting in my bungalow, I was actually researching destinations and booking flights. Paris in September, Rome in October,
Barcelona in November.
Cities I had always longed to see but had postponed visiting, first because of childcare responsibilities, then because of financial constraints, and finally because I had fallen into the habit of putting my own desires last. No more. I also ordered new luggage online, high-quality pieces that would withstand international travel, to be delivered to my home in Minnesota. I researched travel insurance and international phone plans. I downloaded language learning apps to my phone and tablet. By the end of that productive day, I had not only initiated the process of completely restructuring my estate, but had also planned the first 3 months of what would become my grand world tour. The following morning, I rejoined my family for breakfast, greeting everyone pleasantly as if nothing had changed. But something had me. I was no longer seeking their approval or inclusion. I was no longer the mother desperately trying to maintain family harmony at the cost of my own dignity. "You seem different, Mom," Rebecca observed as I helped myself to fresh pineapple from the buffet. "Do I?" I smiled. "I suppose Hawaii agrees with me." Catherine narrowed her eyes. "Where were you yesterday?" "We tried calling." "I had appointments," I said simply, offering no further explanation. "What kind of appointments?" Richard pressed. I looked at him calmly. "Personal ones." My refusal to elaborate clearly unsettled them. They were accustomed to me answering their questions fully, justifying my actions, seeking their approval. This new boundary, this simple refusal to explain myself, represented a fundamental shift in our dynamic. The remaining days in Hawaii followed a similar pattern. I spent time with my grandchildren, especially Lily, building genuine connections without trying to please my children. I declined family activities that didn't interest me. A helicopter tour that seemed overpriced, a luau that ran too late into the evening, and instead explored the island at my own pace, discovering hidden beaches and local cafes not mentioned in tourist guides. I also went shopping, not at the overpriced resort boutiques, but in local shops where I found unique items. A handcrafted silver bracelet with a wave pattern, linen pants and flowing tops in colors I'd never worn before, comfortable but stylish walking sandals for my upcoming travels. My children watched these changes with growing concern. I could see the questions in their eyes, the whispered conversations when they thought I wasn't looking. Who was this woman who declined their invitations without apology? Who made plans without consulting them? Who wore coral lipstick and statement jewelry? It was their mother, finally claiming her own identity apart from them. On our final evening in Hawaii, I invited Lily to dinner. Just the two of us. At a small restaurant in the nearby town that had been recommended by one of the resort staff. Over fresh seafood and tropical drinks, non-alcoholic for her, We had the kind of open, honest conversation that had become impossible with my children. "I'm worried about you, Grandma," Lily admitted. "You seem so different on this trip." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Different doesn't mean worse, sweetheart. I'm finally taking care of myself after decades of putting everyone else first." "Mom says you're having some kind of midlife crisis," Lily said, then giggled. Though I told her that at 68, it would technically be a late-life crisis. I laughed genuinely. "Your mother has always had a gift for dramatic labels." "I'm not having a crisis, Lily. I'm having an awakening." I told her about my travel plans, not the details of my legal changes, as those would come later, and watched her eyes widen with excitement. "That sounds amazing. I want to visit Paris someday too." "Perhaps you'll join me for part of my travels after you start college," I suggested. "I'd love your company." As we walked back to the resort under a blanket of stars, Lily linked her arm through mine. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she said simply. Those 5 words, spoken with such genuine affection, confirmed that I was on the right path. At least one member of the younger generation understood and respected my transformation. The next morning, as we prepared to check out of the resort, I made one final private call to the airline. I changed my return ticket, upgrading once again to first class, but selecting a flight that departed a day later than my family's. I would have one more day in paradise, alone and peaceful, before returning to Minnesota to finalize my new plans. When I announced this change to my children in the resort lobby, their reactions were predictably self-centered. "Mom, we arranged airport transportation for everyone together," Catherine complained. "And who will help you navigate the airport?" Richard added condescendingly. I smiled, remembering how I had managed international travel with 3 small children by myself decades earlier. "I'm sure I'll manage, just as I did when I arrived." Rebecca at least seemed to have gained some perspective during our stay. "It's Mom's vacation too," she reminded her siblings. "She can stay an extra day if she wants." As they departed in their shared shuttle, I stood in the resort entrance, waving goodbye. But unlike at the airport in Minneapolis, this time I was the one choosing to stay behind. And that made all the difference. The evening before my return to Minnesota, I sat at an elegant table in the resort's finest restaurant, alone but not lonely. I had ordered champagne, a rare indulgence, and as I sipped it, I reviewed the momentous decisions I had made during this unexpected journey of self-discovery. My new will would be waiting for my signature when I returned home. The substantial changes would reshape my legacy in ways my children couldn't yet imagine. My travel plans were confirmed through the end of the year, with tentative itineraries sketched out well into the following spring. My wardrobe had been refreshed with pieces that reflected my emerging sense of self, rather than my role as an unassuming mother and grandmother. Most importantly, my perspective had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer defining myself primarily as Catherine, Richard, and Rebecca's mother, a supporting character in their lives. I was Eleanor Williams, a woman with her own desires, opinions, and value. The waiter refilled my champagne glass. "Is there anything else you need, Mrs. Williams?" I smiled, thinking how accurate that simple question was. For the first time in decades, I was asking myself the same thing. What do I need? What do I want? And I was finally listening to the answers. When I returned to Minnesota the next day, settling into my first-class seat with now familiar ease, I felt ready for the conversations that would follow. My children would not be pleased with my decisions. There would be arguments, accusations, perhaps even threats. But I was prepared. 2 days after my return, I invited all 3 children to Sunday dinner at my house. I prepared my signature pot roast, their childhood favorite, and set the dining room table with my best china. This would be a civilized discussion, not a confrontation. They arrived together, having obviously coordinated beforehand. Their wary expressions suggested they had discussed strategies for handling whatever mood or phase they believed I was experiencing. We made it through the main course with superficial conversation about their children, their jobs, the weather. As I served apple pie, homemade, of course, Catherine finally broached the subject they had come to discuss. "Mom, we've been talking, and we're concerned about you," she began, using the measured tone she probably employed with difficult clients. "Your behavior in Hawaii was unusual." Was it? I asked mildly, serving Richard a generous slice of pie. You know it was, Richard interjected. The separate room, the missed activities, the mysterious appointments. It wasn't like you. I finished serving and took my seat. You're right. It wasn't like the me you've come to expect. The mother who accepts being left at an airport gate, who never complains when she's excluded or dismissed, who contributes financially to family events where she's treated as an afterthought. Rebecca winced. Mom, we've apologized for the airport situation. Actually, you haven't. I corrected her gently. Not really. But that's not why I invited you here tonight. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I've made some significant changes in my life, and I wanted to inform you directly. First, I've revised my will and estate plans. All three froze, forks halfway to mouths. What does that mean? Catherine asked cautiously. It means that I've restructured how my assets will be distributed after my death. The three of you are no longer my primary beneficiaries. Richard put down his fork with a clatter. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious, I continued calmly. I've established education trusts for each of my grandchildren. They'll receive funds for college and graduate school, should they choose that path. The remainder of my estate, my house, investments, retirement accounts, and life insurance, will go to a newly established scholarship foundation in your father's name. A scholarship foundation? Catherine repeated incredulously. What about us? You're all financially successful adults, I pointed out. You have homes, careers, substantial savings. You don't need my money. That's not the point, Richard argued, his face flushing. We're your children. Your estate should come to us. Why? I asked simply. Because of biology? Or because you've demonstrated love, respect, and appreciation for your mother? The silence that followed was deafening. You can't do this to us, Catherine finally said, her voice tight with anger. I'm not doing anything to you, I corrected her. I'm making decisions about my own assets. Assets I earned through decades of hard work. The scholarship will help students who couldn't otherwise afford college, just as I struggled to provide that opportunity for all three of you. This is about the airport, isn't it? Rebecca said quietly. You're punishing us. I shook my head. This isn't punishment, Rebecca. It's consequence. Actions reveal priorities and values. Your actions have consistently shown that you don't value me as a person deserving of basic respect and consideration. I'm simply adjusting my estate planning to reflect that reality. Richard pushed his plate away. I can't believe this. You're choosing strangers over your own family. I'm choosing to create a meaningful legacy that reflects my values. I corrected him. Which brings me to my second announcement. I'm going traveling. Traveling where? Catherine demanded. Everywhere I've always wanted to go but postponed visiting while raising you and then supporting your children. I leave for Paris next month, then Rome, Barcelona, and beyond. For how long? Rebecca asked, looking stunned. At least a year, possibly longer. A year, Richard repeated. But what about Thanksgiving, Christmas, the grandchildren's birthdays? I smiled gently. We'll connect via video calls. I've already spoken with the grandchildren about sending them postcards from every city I visit. You told the grandchildren before telling us? Catherine looked genuinely hurt. Yes, I admitted. Because they responded with excitement and joy for me, not concern about how my decisions would affect them personally. The three of them exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Catherine, always the spokesperson, leaned forward. Mom, you can't just change everything like this. We need to discuss this as a family. We are discussing it, I pointed out. I'm informing you of decisions I've already made. You can't be serious about cutting us out of your will, Richard insisted. It's not right. What's not right, I said firmly, is abandoning your mother at an airport after decades of sacrifice on her behalf. What's not right is treating the woman who raised you as an inconvenience. What's not right is assuming you're entitled to an inheritance from someone you've consistently disrespected. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Mom, we love you. We've made mistakes, but we're still family. I love you too, I said, and meant it. That hasn't changed. But love without respect isn't healthy. I needed to make changes that reflect the reality of our relationship, not the fantasy I've clung to. The remainder of the evening was tense and emotional. Catherine threatened legal action to contest the will. Richard accused me of mental instability. Rebecca cycled between tears and attempts at negotiation. I remained calm throughout, serving coffee and listening to their protests without yielding. When they finally left earlier than planned, their desserts half-eaten, I sat alone in my dining room, surrounded by the remnants of our family dinner. I had expected to feel guilty, anxious, perhaps even remorseful. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The truth had been spoken. My path forward was clear. The following 6 months were transformative in ways I could never have imagined while standing abandoned at that airport gate. I walked the streets of Paris, savoring croissants at corner cafes and spending hours in museums I had only read about in books. I explored the ancient ruins of Rome, marveling at the Colosseum and throwing coins in the Trevi fountain. I wandered through Barcelona, enchanted by Gaudi's fantastical architecture and the vibrant energy of Las Ramblas. Throughout my travels, I sent postcards to my grandchildren as promised. Their responses, emails full of questions about my adventures, video calls where they eagerly asked to see my hotel rooms and the views from my windows, were a balm to my spirit. Unlike their parents, they seemed to understand intuitively that my journey wasn't a rejection of family, but an embrace of myself. My children's reactions evolved over time. Catherine remained angry and distant, responding to my occasional emails with brief, formal replies. Richard attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent, a laughable effort that my attorney Howard quickly dismantled with evidence of my lucidity and independence. Rebecca, surprisingly, became more reflective, eventually sending a lengthy email that contained the first genuine apology I had received. "I've been thinking about how I would feel if Lily treated me the way we treated you," she wrote. "The truth is, I'd be heartbroken. I've taken you for granted, Mom, and I'm truly sorry. Your travels look amazing, and while I miss you, I'm glad you're finally doing what makes you happy." That email marked the beginning of a tentative reconciliation, not just with Rebecca, but eventually with all 3 children. It wasn't a dramatic family reunion or a tearful group hug. It was slower, more authentic, built on new foundations of mutual respect rather than obligation. By the time I returned to Minnesota after 14 months abroad, having visited 12 countries and countless cities, the dynamics of our family had shifted permanently. My children no longer assumed I would conform to their expectations or prioritize their convenience. They asked rather than demanded, invited rather than presumed. The scholarship foundation was officially established, with its first recipients selected before my return. I invited my family to the ceremony, where 5 deserving students received their awards. To my surprise, all 3 children attended, along with most of the grandchildren. Catherine even brought flowers. "Dad would be proud," she said quietly as we watched the students accept their scholarships. "This is a beautiful legacy." My relationship with my grandchildren deepened during my time away and after my return. Unfettered by their parents' complicated emotions about me, they embraced the new Grandma Eleanor, the world traveler with colorful scarves and stories about gelato in Florence. Lily especially became a close confidant, spending weekends at my house and making plans to join me for a month in Japan the following spring. As for me, I continued to evolve. I sold my family home, too large now for just me, and purchased a charming condominium in a vibrant downtown area where I could walk to theaters and restaurants. I joined a writing group and began documenting my travels and life experiences. I volunteered teaching English to immigrants, using the skills from my teaching career in new, fulfilling ways. The incident at the airport, painful as it was at the time, had become the catalyst for the richest chapter of my life. By standing up for my own worth, I had not only transformed my relationship with my children, but had discovered parts of myself that had been dormant for decades. I often think about that moment of decision in the Minneapolis airport, when I chose to purchase a first-class ticket instead of accepting the standby status my children had assigned me. It wasn't about the comfortable seat or the champagne, though those were pleasant. It was about declaring that I deserved better treatment, better experiences, better respect. Sometimes the most powerful gift we can give ourselves is the recognition of our own value. It's never too late to teach that lesson or to learn it. So if you're watching this and feeling unappreciated or taken for granted by the people who should value you most, remember my story. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's healthy. And it's never ever too late to reclaim your dignity and reshape your life. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you found something meaningful in my experience, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded of their worth. And leave a comment telling me about a time when you had to stand up for yourself. I read every comment and would love to connect with you. Until next time, remember that the best inheritance you can leave isn't money. It's the example of living with self-respect and purpose.